So today we have a new author, Mark Jones, launching his book. Welcome, Mark.
Yeah, thank you, Susan. It's great to be here.
So this is a really exciting book and a book that resonates with what we do because storytelling, as we know, is a really powerful tool. So the book is called The Story Code for Leaders, and it's to unlock the resilience and influence by rewriting the stories that we tell ourselves. So Mark, can you tell us, how did you start using the storytelling to enhance your own life and to empower others?
Yeah, one of the people I was speaking to about the book described it as like part memoir and part guide on how to rewrite the stories you tell yourself. And to that end, I've come through a really difficult, challenging, but important time recovering from burnout and depression over a period of about 5, 6 years now. And on that journey, the key insight I found in working with a whole bunch of different medical professionals was that the stories I use to help other people become better storytellers at work, I could also use on myself. It's almost like putting up a mirror where I sort of took a hard look at myself and was starting to think about, well, if I was advising myself, as it were, what would I say? Like, what would be some of the tools and techniques I'd use from my own storytelling experience? So that really was the start of the journey and beginning to unlock what has now become the story code.
Fantastic. So your life experience was a bit like, oh, I already know this. How can this be used in my own life? And you obviously had great success. And now it's about sharing this with others, which is fantastic. And so that's kind of, would you say, how you cracked the story code for yourself? And what does the story code unlock for others? So if you can kind of answer that for the listeners today who might want to understand a little bit about what this book is.
Yeah. So, in very simple terms, it's about understanding that if you're in a place, usually in midlife, where you're not sure what's coming next, maybe you've lost hope in the future, or you're feeling burnt out or stuck, is quite often the phrase that I hear. And you feel like you're not being your best self. So, that's the sort of problem set that we're dealing with. And the opposite of that, or if you like, the goal is how to be your best self, right? How to thrive is probably one of the maybe bits of jargon that we use in the mental fitness world. So that's sort of a bit of a quick framing. The story code is an approach to rewriting your story. And I take people through a very simple 4-step process in the coaching work that I do. And I'll explain that in just a moment. But the core of it is understanding that there are 4 pillars of self care that you've got to think about if you're someone who is feeling stuck or burnt out or disengaged, which, just by the way, is around about half the global workforce is feeling that way. So it's pretty stunning to think about it in that context. And the 3 pillars that we're all really familiar with from a self-care perspective and things that you're in control with is eating well, sleeping well, and exercising well. Those things were annoyingly what I paid a lot of money to learn, right? You go to a doctor and they say, well, you really got to fix these things. And I'm like, spent all this money to like discover the basics. But the thing is, they're the things that start to come undone when you lose a sense of yourself. You start medicating with eating too much food or whatever it might be. But the thing is, I found in my research that the 4th pillar of self care is self talk, or the stories we tell ourselves. Now, we know this by a lot of other names like mental health, mental well being mindful. All these things are really good. But what I'm speaking about are things like your inner critic, which is that voice that pops up in your head and says, you can't do this. The second one is limiting beliefs. And limiting beliefs are these really foundational ideas like, I'm not the right person for this job, or I could never do that. I'm not somebody who does something daring or outrageous, for example. And then the very last one is about this idea of a narrative that we hold. Now, most people don't realize that they are actually self-narrating their whole lives. And in neuroscience, they talk a lot about the fact that our minds are constantly capturing data and information, and we're comparing our life events to what we thought was going to happen as affirming who we are, or maybe they challenge our identity. And that's why, of course, the sleep science talks about how our minds sort of process the day's events, right? So we're constantly in this place of seeing ourselves within the context of our own life narrative, right? Now, so if we hold all of that together, we've got this sense of pillars of self-care. How do I become healthy, sustainable, resilient over time? The process is very simple. I'll just summarize it. So the story code is an acronym. So there's 4 things, CODE, as you'd expect. And the first one is challenge. And so you need to actually challenge the inner critic, identify what it is. What are these things that you say to yourself, like, I'm no good, or I'll never make it, all these sorts of negative things. And I encourage people to think about your inner coach. So how can you empower that inner critic with really positive stories from your own experience? So that's the first one. Now, the second one is overwrite. An overwrite is saying, I'm going to look at this narrative I spoke about. So I'm going to say, I have maybe seen myself as not in a rags to riches type life trajectory, but in a maybe a Flight of the Conchords once had a joke about being in a rags to rags story. You're never going to go anywhere, right? So you've got to really override this sense of what your narrative is. Then the third one is decide. You actually have to commit to going from this old story to a new story. So what are you going to commit to? Who is this new person I'm going to be? And then the last one is encode. And encode is about building in these daily habits. So we lean on these 4 pillars again. What are the daily habits you're going to commit to over time to look after your health, your eating, your sleeping, and your self-talk? What are these constant phrases that you're going to lean into? What are these stories about your own life that you're going to lead into? So look, that's a very quick overview of the code itself. And the thing to remember is it's something that I've unpacked from neuroscience, from doing research. I've done lots of interviews with really amazing leaders who've been on this journey, and then dug deep into my own experience from 3 decades of storytelling work. So when you look at all that together, it's this commitment to moving, as I said, from an old story where you feel like you don't have any hope to unlocking this new story, this new future, and then walking into it. I've lived it myself. I'm living it and I've written about it. So as you can probably tell, I'm pretty excited about this.
And so you should be, because as much as you've explained it beautifully for the listeners today, it's about when we get into the book and we start actually doing those exercises and we start unpacking it, that we get to rewrite our story and create that. So this book, it's a real journey that takes them on, but also really helps them figure out some of this themselves. So it takes them through that journey, which is amazing. So I think that there's so many stories that people tell themselves to hold themselves back. As you said, some of them, we're not good enough, or why should I be here? And I think we all need to really look, even if we are at a great place, we can always rewrite our story and create our next chapter and our next way that we want to be. So if anyone wants to jump on, the link will be below for you to purchase the book, really get an insight into Mark's intensive research and expertise in storytelling combined with his own experience for leaders. So for anyone, really, it's about leading your own life. You could be leading your own life and still change your story and make a difference. But thanks, Mark. Is there anything that you want to leave for the readers today? I think that they need to just grab the book so that they can start unpacking it themselves. But is there anything you want to leave with the listeners here today?
Yeah, I think maybe a final thought would be we all want to do well and we want to lead well, so that the context you say is leading well, but leading others actually begins with leading yourself. And so that's why I'm so passionate about these 4 pillars of self-care, because it's not just self-care in some sort of soft way. It's actually self-leadership. It's taking responsibility for who you are and who you're becoming. And that's why we can see these gaps in leadership in the marketplace, in work and all sorts of different settings, is because people actually haven't looked after themselves well enough in order to become more effective in whatever space they find themselves. So yeah, my encouragement would be think about how you're leading yourself before you lead others.
Absolutely. As they say, put on the oxygen mask first to yourself. You got to look after yourself first before you can look after the others. That's a really strong message. So link will be below. Jump on, grab the book. It's an amazing read. And yeah, we look forward to hearing all the people that are rewriting their stories. Thanks,
Thank you.
Mark.
Thank you so much. And thanks to you and the team for really helping me on this journey.
No problems. Our pleasure. Thanks so much. Bye for now.